On our newscast this evening, analysts warn that the recent slowdown in Korean exports to China could become a long-term trend that threatens the overall growth of the domestic economy. And Germany's foreign minister shares his experiences and provides his perspective on Korean reunification. His biggest advice: trust and patience above all else. Russia decides to resume gas supplies to Ukraine after many rounds of negotiations, but it comes at a cost. Stay with us for these stories and more coming up on Early Edition at 6. It's 6 p.m. on a Friday in Korea. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. This is Hwang Sung-hee coming to you live from Seoul.
Good to have you with us. I'm Daniel Che. Our first story focuses on the reunification of the two Koreas. The first meeting of a joint unification advisory panel between Korea and Germany was held in Seoul today. That's right. The German Foreign Minister said building trust between the two Koreas was the key to a smooth unification process. Our Hwang Sung-hee starts us off.
At a joint press conference with his South Korean counterpart Yun Byung-se on Friday, German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier said conditions for the reunification of the two Koreas were easing.
North Korea is becoming more and more isolated, and its longtime allies are not as opposed to reunification of the Korean peninsula as they once were.
Steinmeier is on a two-day visit to Seoul for a meeting of their joint unification advisory panel. As the world's only divided nation, Korea is seeking to learn lessons from Germany's unification. The German minister said trust and patience were essential.
Through a process of trust building, South Korea must observe whether North Korea responds positively. If not, the South must not make hasty investments and rather control its tempo.
Steinmeier said, however, this trust-building process will never be possible as long as the North clings to its nuclear program. And while a round of inter-Korean meetings slated for Thursday was scrapped due to controversy over anti-Pyongyang leaflet campaigns by South Korean activists, the importance of dialogue was emphasized.
Just like East and West Germany engaged in dialogue and cooperation, the two Koreas should do the same. It's also important for Korea to secure the support and understanding of its neighboring countries, as Germany had done.
The visiting German foreign minister said that Germany had achieved what all had believed was impossible, and added that a similar happy ending will also be possible on the Korean peninsula. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
And a German lawmaker who recently returned from a trip to Pyongyang agrees that the North is ready to open a dialogue on human rights issues and inter-Korean ties.
Armin Koshik said Thursday that North Korean leader Kim Jongun is still firmly in power despite speculation about his health amid a prolonged break from the public eye. He went on to say North Korea wants to boost ties with Germany and the European Union.
Koshik added that he told the North Korean leader that Germany is willing to be an honest advisor by sharing his experience as a divided country, but it cannot act as a mediator between the two Koreas. The Korean Air Force is celebrating the operational deployment of its first indigenously developed fighter jet, the FA-50. And as our Kim Hyun-bin reports, this is just the beginning of the military's plans for the state-of-the-art jet.
This is the first Korean-built fighter jet called the FA-50, taking off from an airstrip. A short time later, it shows off a number of airborne maneuvers that demonstrate its capabilities.
적 지역에 깊숙이 침투하여 강화 공격을 하고 위협 회피 기동을 실시하겠습니다.
The FA-50 is an improved version of its predecessor, the TA-50, and will play a support role for the Korean Air Force. The fighter jet has a top speed of 1,800 kilometers an hour, which is roughly 1.5 times faster than the speed of sound. The FA-50 has an operation radius of 270 kilometers, is loaded with air-to-air and air-to-surface missiles, as well as with 4.5 tons of high-tech weaponry, such as GPS-guided direct attack munitions. It can also detect enemy radar and comes equipped with a missile defense system that makes it difficult to shoot down. The fighter jet has successfully passed all tactical tests, and experts believe it can easily outrun and outmaneuver the backbone of North Korea's Air Force, the MiG-21.
By integrating the F-A-50 into frontline bases, we'll be better capable of countering threats from the north.
The South has now established a first battalion of 20 F-A-50s and plan to create 2 more by the year 2016 to replace its aging fleet of F-5 fighter jets. This past March, the Philippines signed a contract to purchase 12 F-A-50s for $420 million. South Korea is currently in negotiations with 3 other countries who have also expressed an interest in the fighter jet. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
On the country's economic front, Korea's finance minister has asked officials to put more efforts into revitalizing the economy as the general public cannot feel the tangible effects of recent stimulus measures yet. In a letter to officials at his ministry, Choi Kyung-hwan compared the local economy to a car, pointing out the new set of measures only started the engine. The finance minister also expressed concerns over key economic bills being held up at the National Assembly and external market conditions that are not particularly favorable at the moment. And we zoom in, one of the clearest external risks the finance minister was talking about, slowing exports to China. Analysts say the downward trend in Korean exports to its largest trading partner could last for a longer period of time and threaten overall economic growth. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
There's no short fix to boosting dwindling Korean exports to China. The problems are structural, and this is why Uri Finance Research Institute says boosting exports to China is going to be a long, painstaking process.
China is increasingly producing the parts and equipment that once were imported from Korea, so Korean exporters need to increase their production of consumer goods and high-tech parts and materials.
Korea's exports to China are mostly comprised of intermediate and capital goods, which dropped by around 2% and 7% respectively during the January to September period year on year. Korea's exports of flat panel displays dropped by more than 9% over the same period to $12.5 billion. The researcher warns this downward trend could affect Korea's economic growth since China is Korea's largest trade partner at more than a quarter of Korea's total exports. When taking Hong Kong into account, the proportion shoots up to nearly 30%. But it's a different story for other regions. Exports to China from the United States, the European Union, and ASEAN member countries are slowly inching up. In the case of Europe, consumer goods, particularly luxury items, make up a high portion of its exports to China. In contrast, the proportion of Korea's consumer goods, which include automobiles and wireless communication devices, comprise just over 3% of all exports to China. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Another external risk stems from Japan. Tokyo surprised global financial markets this Friday afternoon by announcing fresh monetary stimulus measures. The Bank of Japan said it would step up its asset purchases at an annual pace of 80 trillion yen, or roughly $720 billion from the current pace of 60 to 70 trillion yen. The unexpected move came in response to a lack of economic growth following a sales tax hike in April. The benchmark Nikkei stock index spiked to a 7-year high following the announcement and finished up nearly 5%. Experts here are concerned that Tokyo's latest move would weigh on local exporters by eroding their price competitiveness. And a growing number of Chinese companies and individuals are making investments overseas. Citing the country's Commerce Ministry, the state-run People's Daily reported that China's outbound direct investment stood at $17.8 billion last year. That's nearly 40 times higher than the figure recorded 11 years ago. And this year's outbound direct investment is also on a rise. It went up over 20% in the first 9 months compared from the previous year to around $75 billion. A Chinese official said that given the current pace, it would exceed inbound investment by the end of the year. And back here in Korea, Apple devotees started to fall in line outside smartphone stores around the nation last night, and they were happy to do so. October 31st is the official launch date of Apple iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. Customers who already pre-ordered the newest models will be the first ones to get their hands on the highly anticipated gadget. Industry watchers say the first round of pre-orders for both models on mobile carriers SK Telecom, KT and LG U+ were filled in less than 30 minutes last Friday. Prices start at roughly $750 for iPhone 6 and around $875 for the larger iPhone 6 Plus.
Historians consider Japan's forced mobilization of women into sexual slavery during World War II as historical fact, while the Shinzo Abe administration continues to hedge over the issue. But their case has just been further weakened by a new report written by Japanese authors who say there is simply no disputing that Japan was responsible for the atrocities. Connie Lee has more.
It's confirmation from Japanese scholars. Despite what Abe cabinet officials have said about the women who were forced into sexual slavery before and during World War II, Japanese historians say it is an unshakable truth that the Japanese military was deeply involved in the forced mobilization of the so-called comfort women. The country's representative research group, the Historical Science Society of Japan, recently released a report that criticizes the inaccurate historical accounts of the sex slaves, saying it is a fact that the women were forced into sexual servitude.
We as historians make the statement because reflection on the issue and over relations between Korea and Japan is needed. We cannot deny the fact that sexual slavery did exist and the suffering of the victims was real.
The report goes against the Abe administration's stance on the issue. The Japanese leader has said that the women, many of whom were from Korea, were not forcefully mobilized, which he defined as breaking into a house and dragging a woman out. However, the scholars define it much differently, saying that forced mobilization includes all actions that go against a person's will, such as scamming, threatening, and trafficking. Prime Minister Abe says his cabinet would uphold an official statement issued in 1993, which acknowledged that Japan forced women into sexual servitude. But cabinet officials have openly and publicly denied that in recent months. Abe himself said there was no evidence to prove the claims. It's a move that suggests he wants to minimize his country's responsibility for the more than 50,000 estimated women who were forced into sexual slavery for the Japanese military. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
It took several rounds of intense talks, but finally a deal has been struck under which Russia will resume natural gas supplies to Ukraine and the European Union over the winter. The deal requires the cash-strapped Ukrainian government to pay its multi-billion-dollar bill to Moscow within the next 2 months. Kim Min-ji reports.
Russia has agreed to resume natural gas supplies to Ukraine and the European Union throughout the cold winter months. The deal reached on Thursday in Brussels comes after several grueling rounds of talks.
With the strong support of the European Commission, Ukraine and Russia have today found agreement on their outstanding energy debt issues and on an interim solution that enables supplies to continue this winter.
Under the deal, Ukraine will pay $3.1 billion in 2 installments by the end of this year to cover its outstanding debt for its previous supplies. Kiev is also required to pay $1.5 billion up front to cover the bill from now until March next year. The European Union will help Ukraine make the payments through aid and guarantees.
The process has not been easy. However, we have managed to come to a compromise, and on many matters, the Russian has compromised as regards the price, as regards the structuring of the debt. This is our contribution to the compromise in order to stabilize the situation in Ukraine so that the autumn and winter period is safe and that the supply to the European consumers is also stable.
Meanwhile, the European Energy Commissioner said the agreement could be the first glimmer of a relaxation in the relationship between Russia and Ukraine. Gas supplies were suspended in June following disputes over Russia's annexation of Crimea earlier in the year. Ukraine, which relies on Russia for about half of its gas supplies, is being forced to rely on gas transfers from nearby European nations and its own reserves. A third of the European Union's gas is also from Russia, of which roughly 50% is transported in pipelines crisscrossing Ukraine. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Staying on some international news, breaking away from his typical private self, Apple CEO Tim Cook has come out to say he is proud to be gay. His statement came in an essay published by Bloomberg Businessweek, in which the 53-year-old writes he considered being gay among God's greatest gifts. He said he thought it to be worthwhile to trade off his privacy to inspire others who were struggling with their own identities. Cook is now the first openly gay U.S. executive to head a Fortune 500 company.
Well, good for Tim Cook. We shift to a different story now. Well, no one can be told how majestic the famed ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City is. You have to see it for yourself. That's why millions of people make the trip every year. But the ravages of time can affect its true beauty. Our Kim Young-gil reports on how technology steps in to lend a helping hand.
When Michelangelo took on the 4-year task of painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel back in the 16th century, he had only the light of the day coming through small windows to help him. In the 500 years since its completion, his masterpiece has been enjoyed by a countless number of people. Now they're being seen in a new light thanks to 7,000 LED lamps that have been installed at the chapel, mainly to reduce the heat from traditional lighting that was damaging the frescoes. The new illumination system also brings out the best of the chapel's famed frescoes and has even brought out aspects that were previously left in the shadows.
See, the beauty of the frescoes is now obvious to everybody. Nice and wonderful colors, the plasticity, the three-dimensional effects Michelangelo has used in his figures, it's really outstanding.
In addition to the new lighting, a new air filtering system moves air slowly through the vast chamber. As dust and carbon dioxide are regarded as major threats to the fragile frescoes, the air temperature and humidity levels will be adjusted using data from 70 sensors in the chapel walls. The Vatican Museum also plans to restrict the number of visitors per year.
When we reach 6 million, enough, no more. We will not exceed that number. It is the maximum number. We will make sure that number is not exceeded by regulating reservations.
The changes are part of the most recent renovation to the Sistine Chapel. The last, which spanned a total of 14 years, was completed in 1994. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Riding on the crest of the Korean wave of mainly popular TV series, an increasing number of Chinese couples are coming to the country to get a unique Korean touch to their pre-wedding photos. Our Connie Kim reports.
Making a reservation at this wedding planning company is not a Korean couple, but Chinese to-be-weds who came to Korea for a photo shoot package. This Chinese couple will select their wedding dress and tux, get their hair and makeup done, and get their wedding photos taken. And they'll do it all in just 3 days.
After seeing actress Chun Ji-hyun in the drama My Love from the Star, I got interested in Korean-style makeup. As I was preparing for my wedding, I thought it would be meaningful for us as a couple to come to Korea and get our wedding photos taken here.
Bride-to-be Yao says she is thrilled to experience some of the high-quality services Korea's wedding industry has to offer, even if it comes with a price tag that is 3 to 4 times higher than in China. Despite the high cost of photo shooting packages for Chinese couples here, the nation's wedding industry is seeking to attract more would-be newlyweds from China, seeking a Korean touch to their once-in-a-lifetime experience. The craze for a high-quality taste of Korea's wedding industry has led to an explosive growth in recent years. One of Korea's largest wedding planning companies says it has shot wedding photos for nearly 790 Chinese couples this year alone, a major jump from the 5 it had in 2007. And as more companies cater to what Chinese couples are looking for, Korea's wedding industry is set to leap forward.
With the popularity of Korean dramas, Chinese couples want their wedding photos to be exactly like Korean celebrities' photo shoots. They look for backgrounds with tall skyscrapers or sets that show they are in Korea.
Many wedding studios now have translators on hand to help lure even more Chinese couples looking for specialized Korean wedding services. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And Hanok, Korea's traditional houses, were once thought to be consigned to the past.
Well, actually, a growing number of Koreans these days are choosing Hanok over, let's say, high-rise apartments.
Right, and that's because Hanoks are now being fitted with sleek, modern interiors to go with their traditional exterior beauty. Park Ji-won reports.
Hangyanghan is a gallery cafe that opened last year in central Seoul. The cafe features a traditional Korean exterior and modern interior designs. For its unique traditional beauty, it received the Best Hanok Award earlier this month from the nation's Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport. Kim Hyung-woo, the French-trained architect and owner of the gallery, says he blended modern construction materials while maintaining the unique beauty of Korean Hanok.
I tried to give traditional Korean architecture a more modern feel that fits the modern lifestyle. I blended modern materials to create modern spatial beauty in the traditional house. I think traditional Korean architecture can be reinterpreted in an infinite number of ways.
The number of Hanok houses in the nation has risen to about 100,000, nearly double the number from just 6 years ago. Due to their rise in popularity, SH Corporation, the public urban development company for the Seoul metropolitan area, has created a new Hanok village in northern Seoul that caters to individual buyers. A few months after going on the market, about 85% of the 156 lots available had been already sold.
Unlike modern apartments, Hanok is built in an eco-friendly way due to its construction materials such as rocks, red clay, and trees. So people concerned about their health and allergies tend to show more interest in Hanok these days.
Combining the eco-friendly and aesthetic strength of traditional Korean housing elements with the comforts of modern living, Hanok houses these days strike a balance for the best of both worlds. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
It's been a wet and gloomy day here in Korea, right?
Well, let's hope the weekend has something more brighter in store for us. We turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center for details. Michelle?
Good evening, guys, and happy Halloween. Currently, the rain has stopped here in Seoul, but it's still raining heavily in the southern regions and in both Chungcheong-do provinces. Now, some areas, especially in the mountainous regions, are under very heavy rainfall advisories. Now, we are expecting over 80 millimeters of rain in the mountainous regions of Jeju Island, while 20 to 60 are expected on both Jeollado provinces and throughout the rest of Jeju Island, while the central region will see it up to 40 millimeters. Now, this rain is expected to last for a while until Sunday afternoon in most regions, which will bring down our daytime highs to the low teens starting on Monday. And to our readings for tomorrow, so we'll start off the Saturday morning at 13 before reaching up to 20 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will reach up to 19 and 21 degrees. And to other regions, Jeju Island peaks to 21, Dokdo drops to 18, while Mount Kumgang hits 17 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and now here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that's all from us this week. Thank you and good day or good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. This has been Daniel Choi.
And I'm Hwang Sung-hee. Thanks for choosing Arirang for this hour's news updates. And it's Friday, so wherever you are, have a relaxing weekend. We'll be back with more on Monday.